He kept going. He stood up. He was able to keep going. He didn't pass out. A divorce from his wife. His son quit going to church. His daughter saw it all fall apart. Now, years after he died in 2023, they can finally talk. You will be shocked by what they told you about his last days. The man he was in church wasn't the man he was at home, and the last 3 words he said to his son changed everything. Charles Stanley was born in Dry Fork, Virginia on September 25, 1932. The Great Depression was going on at the time. People who lost their jobs went hungry, and millions of people felt like they had no hope in life. Charles Stanley and Rebecca Hall, his parents, were just barely making ends meet. There were blocks of bread lines. People lost their homes all at once. It was not a good time to have kids. But in some way, that rough start made room for one of the most powerful voices in Christian preaching. Things changed 9 months after Charles was born. He was only 29 years old when his father died out of the blue. He was there one day and not there the next. There was no goodbye and no memory left behind. There was only a name and quiet. While the US economy was in its worst slump ever, his mother Rebecca was left to care for him and her baby by herself. Charles always felt like he was being left behind. He often talked about having a hole in his heart as a child and asking who his father was and what kind of man he could have become with his help. He would talk about God as the Father who never leaves, forgets or turns away because of that love. Rebecca married again when Charles was 9 years old. Her son had lost a father role and she thought she was giving him one again. But that choice almost killed them both. John Hall, her new husband, was a drinker who had a bad temper. The nightmare started almost right away. Rebecca found out she had married into a lie 2 weeks after the wedding. Hall's family had lied to her. They knew he was mean. They told her he'd change if he got married. He didn't. Even worse, Charles was always scared. It was him who saw his dad choke his mother. Every night he locked the door to his room. He even kept a gun that was loaded next to his bed sometimes, just in case. He lived in a war zone as a child. That terrible thing didn't just hurt him, it made him stronger. He learned that we need hope to stay alive and that the only person we can really trust is God. Charles went to church to get away from the chaos at home. He came from a Pentecostal family. He helped start the Emmanuel Pentecostal Holiness Church in Dry Fork with his grandpa, George Washington Stanley. Charles grew up in a Pentecostal family and loved the fiery talks, loud prayers, and strong emotions that came with meeting with God. He would hide out in the church basement on the worst nights at home. He cried and yelled as he prayed out loud, pleading with God for peace. He learned how to pray with all his heart, not just a whisper. He never lost his Pentecostal fire, even after he became a Baptist. It changed the way he led, spoke, and taught. Something switched everything when I was 17. Charles went to Siler City, North Carolina, to see his grandpa. He wasn't sure if he wanted to become a teacher. He was too young, broken, and weak to handle things. But his grandfather told him one thing that would help him through everything. "Charles, you should run away if God tells you to break through that wall. He is the one who needs to make the hole." He felt that moment like thunder. After that, his main thought became clear: follow God and tell him what to do about it. It was more than just a saying. I had to stay alive. When things in life didn't make sense, loyalty held him down. Charles started going to school in the 1950s. He first went to the University of Richmond and then to Fort Worth, Texas's Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. At that time, there were a lot of Bible schools. It had tripled in size since 1945. The world changed quickly, and Christians were finding a new voice on TV and radio. In 1949, Billy Graham began his crusades. As a result, evangelism spread across the country. Charles jumped right in and studied Greek, Hebrew, theology, and how to teach. He wasn't just studying the Bible, he learned how to make it real and how to connect it to other people's pain. Charles was only 25 years old when he became a preacher and taught preaching at Fruitland Baptist Church in North Carolina in 1957. There were only about 150 people in the small church in a hilly town, but it was just what he needed. He was a minister full-time and taught preaching and evangelism at a nearby Bible institute. How much does he make? He didn't care that it was only $75 a week. It was something he loved to do. He learned how to talk, led, and help people who are having problems in the real world. A lot of his followers were poor farmers or factory workers who were dealing with insecurity and poverty. He did more for them than preach. They had hope because of him. He became a Baptist preacher in 1958 when he was only 26 years old. That was a very young age. But Charles was ready. Most ministers were ordained when they were in their 30s. His time was just right. Evangelism on TV was going through the roof. Billy Graham was on all of them. Oral Roberts had just started his own TV ministry. Charles would be there soon. The document that gave him the power to baptize, marry, and lead churches came out that same year. More importantly, though, it was the start of a new type of mission that would grow to reach millions of people all over the world. Charles moved around a lot from 1959 to 1968. Start with Fairborn, Ohio, then move on to Miami, Florida, and finally Bartow, Florida. Every church had its own problems to solve. He led a church in Fairborn that was close to a huge Air Force base. Because of the Cold War, the town grew very quickly. He was a minister in Miami during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and his church grew from 400 people to over 800. He did well, but he kept going even though. In 1968, he took over a smaller church in Bartow, a quiet city of 12,000 people. A lot of people would say it was a step backward. For Charles, though, it was a chance to make something real. He meant to begin with nothing and grow strong roots. That time of being restless wasn't a loss, and it was training. He was getting better at what he did by learning from each group and waiting for the big moment that would change everything. It was 1969 when Charles Stanley walked into First Baptist Atlanta for the first time. He had no idea what kind of war he was beginning. The church was split up. What? Yes. There were fights between groups over politics and religion. As for Stanley, he was the only preacher there, and he stood right in the middle of it. At one meeting, things got so bad that someone punched him. He didn't leave, though. He stayed. He had to deal with the tension, the whisper campaigns, and the open hatred for 2 long, hard years. Then it was October 1, 1971. The church held an open vote that day to decide if Stanley should be made senior preacher. The room was tense. The feelings were raw. After all the votes were cast, it was clear what the result was. Yes, Stanley was the 16th leader of one of the most important churches in the South. He was 39 years old. It cost something, though. Many people who didn't agree with him quit for good, leaving the church hurt and broken, but finally ready to move on. He took an even bigger risk the next year. Stan started the Chapel Hour on 2 Atlanta TV stations, WZA-TV 11 and Wonks 46, in 1972. The show was only 30 minutes long. It wasn't anything special, but 16,000 people in the area saw it, which was enough to get attention. Behind the scenes, Christian networks were looking for views that seemed real and useful. Stanley's straightforward Bible teaching was just what was needed. In 1978, the Christian Broadcasting Network tried to get in touch. They had to find material to put on their new satellite system. It was Yes, Stanley. In just 1 week, he went from having 16,000 fans in Atlanta to having fans all over the country. The show got a new name, got in touch with Dr. Charles Stanley, and changed who it was. By the early 1980s, almost every big city in the US had it on TV. That's when it went global. Stan's word was being sent out in 150 countries and 114 languages by the end. But cameras were not the start of his media business. It began in schoolrooms. Stanley opened the George Mueller Christian School in Miami in 1966, 5 years before he became famous on TV. At that time, he was still the leader of First Baptist Miami. The school was more than just a place to learn. It had to do with morals. It was named for a famous Christian leader named George Mueller who took care of kids with nothing but prayer and faith. That name was important. Stanley thought that faith should be a part of everyday life, especially in how children were raised and taught. His master's degree was also coming to an end at the same time. Starting a school, running a church, and going to school. That showed the kind of drive that would make his national mission what it is today. In 1968, he left Miami and went to Bartow, Florida, By 1969, he was on his way to Atlanta, but those early years showed something. Stanley didn't just think about church on Sundays, he had big ideas. Those thoughts never stopped. About 5,000 people were going to First Baptist Atlanta when Stanley took over. That number tripled by the 1990s. The church had to have more room. In 1997, he made a choice that caused a lot of debate. He sold the old building in Midtown Atlanta and moved the church to Dunwoody, a suburb. There were enough seats in the new building for 3,000 people. It was sleek, new, and ready for the future. Stanley didn't just care about numbers, though. Those were his plans. The Passion Play, a musical reenactment of Jesus last week, was one of the most well-known. It took place from 1977 to 2011 and had a lot of helpers. The church turned into a machine of service, media, and outreach under Stanley's direction. First Baptist Atlanta wasn't just a church when he left in 2020 after almost 50 years. It was a cornerstone of the country. But maybe the most important change happened in 1978 when technology made his mission possible. That year, CBN satellite network changed everything by turning the church hour into In Touch. It didn't go up slowly. In just 1 week, Stanley's face was shown on TV all over the United States. Back then, it was unheard of for a priest to be seen like that. Stanley wasn't scared of being seen, though. He took it in. He made it official in 1982. He set up In Touch Ministries as its own charity, which gave him full freedom to grow. He did it. That was also the start of radio distribution. He soon reached more than 115 million homes in the US alone. He didn't stop there, though. With tools that almost no one else was using, he went to the most remote parts of the world. He became obsessed with new ideas. Stanley thought technology could be fun too. It was very important. He meant for everyone to hear him, even those who lived in towns without electricity. So he made Messenger Lab, a line of 8 solar-powered audio gadgets for people who don't have access to the internet. There is no church and no power. It could play 65 of his lectures, as well as the New Testament, the Psalms, and the Proverbs in 2 languages. With time, more than 1 million messengers were given away. It's worth more than $26 million, we've heard. It didn't just go to one area either. These gadgets worked on every region, even Antarctica. At the same time, Stanley's lectures were shown on more than 4,000 radio, TV, and satellite stations. His speaking skills were 127. He was on podcasts, digital platforms, mobile apps, you name it, because he thought this was the best time ever to spread the faith. He wasn't just a big name in the media, he was also a political flashpoint. Stanley became head of the Southern Baptist Convention in 1984. In the history of the religion, it was one of the most stormy times. The SBC was at war with each other over biblical inerrancy, which means that the Bible was right in every way, even when it came to science. It was known as the conservative resurgence by conservatives. Some people called it a takeover. Stanley got 52% of the vote, which was enough to win the presidency. Just barely. Still, it was enough. From 1984 to 1986, he was in office for 2 terms. He was also in charge of the Peace Committee at that time. It was set up in 1985 to end the fighting. After 15 long meetings, the group wrote a report that was 6,450 words long and backed up what Stanley and other conservatives were saying. After that, the SBC went toward a more conservative theology, and Stanley was there in the middle of that change. In 1966, Charles Stanley fought in a Miami school. In 1971, he fought in a church. In the 1980s, he built a satellite kingdom, or solar kingdom. Charles Stanley was at the top of his public life in February 1988. The National Religious Broadcasters Hall of Fame had just made him a member. It was a big deal. More than 115 million homes in the United States were hearing his lectures. And getting in touch with Dr. Charles Stanley was a regular thing on Christian TV and radio. He was much more than just a teacher. He was a leader who shaped the future of Christian media and the face of a movement. While everyone else was happy for him, at home, something much worse was going on. In 1989, a year later, Stanley went to Kansas City for a ministry gathering. As he prayed in his hotel room, he looked out the window and saw many satellite dishes on nearby roofs. He said that was when God spoke to him. This is how the message could reach every country. Then he thought of Psalm 67 too. Tell everyone in the world about your clever way to save money. That moment changed everything. In the end, his lectures were translated into 127 languages and shown on more than 4,000 networks around the world. But the man behind the message was falling apart as it went out. Anna, his wife, had been feeling more and more alone. Charles was gone more and more as he tried to grow his mission and make his church bigger.